Hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
Late, says the White Wabbit. We might be last, and we certainly are least, but here's our Zack Snyder's Justice League spoiler review.
That's right, spoilers, and I'm sure you've already seen it. You might have already seen it 5 times, might have seen the Justice's Gray version too, the documentary, everything else, but here we are giving our review a week and a half later.
If you've ever watched our live streams, you know that we were always on time, so here we are again.
Long story short, Zack Snyder's Justice League is a continuation of his long-standing Snyderverse with Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and now we have his version of Justice League. That abomination we got in 2017 has been forgotten, not by the studio, but by everybody else that matters. This is our true Justice League.
So to start off with the pros, I have a good one. The only pro that matters, Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Psych, thought I was dead and shit. It ain't over.
All right, let's actually talk about this. In our non-spoiler, we already mentioned this, but I feel like it just needs to be put out there more. Junkie XL soundtrack/score is phenomenal. Since this movie has come out, throughout the week, almost on repeat, I've been playing There Is a Kingdom by Nick Cave. That song just encapsulates that moment with Arthur walking out to the edge of the pier as you see him struggle with what his purpose is. Should he take up that mantle? Yeah, we have the solo Aquaman movie, but for some reason, I kind of forgot about it. Actually, there is a reason. I forgot about it. But this moment just fit so well, and I wish somehow that song would have been carried over. Even though this movie came out after his Aquaman solo movie, I feel like somehow this should have been his song, not Ocean to Ocean by Pitbull. Like, this should have been the song before he takes up that mantle as King of Atlantis.
I concur, Doctor. The score in this film is amazing, even to the point where Junkie will use some themes that we've already heard before, but he updates them. The score in this movie is insane. He incorporates songs like There's a Kingdom, Song to the Siren, which is another one of my favorite scenes with Flash and Iris West. Another popular score is At the Speed Force. This entire soundtrack is chock full of just gold, and I love it. I love listening to it. I love bumping it in my car. It is fantastic and such an upgrade from what we saw in 2017.
And of course, which consisted of 95% of Zack Snyder's Justice League.
I think one of my biggest pros of this movie is how well balanced of a film is. And what I mean by that is the fact that it has stuff for the long-term Snyder followers, for us fans who love Man of Steel, who love BVS, but then it also has some things for people who maybe weren't a fan of the first 2 movies. There's some humor with Flash and Alfred, then there's also some emotional scenes with Cyborg and even Superman, and even during Superman's return, and then also Flash. He has a great connection with Iris West and his dad, so there is a little bit of both in this movie, and I think that's what makes it work so incredibly well and why it is being so well received.
The overall balance for this movie is what's driving a lot of positive reviews. The fact that you can take some emotional moments, you have some deep moments here and there, and you also have some comedic ones. Besides Snack Hole, that one still sucks. I'm not sure why he left that one in, but maybe that's his only take, I guess. But besides that moment, the humor is balanced really well with the emotion, and obviously, it takes itself very serious at the same time. And I think this is something that people have been really craving. The MCU has watered down comic book movies with its overuse of comedic elements. Here is the moment where we got something serious, but still with that light pinch of levity mixed in. Especially when you think about in 2016 when this was filmed, with the concept that what's gonna happen afterwards. So this being the middle movie, it has a lighter tone before we dive into the deep, dark world of the Nightmare timeline.
I absolutely love the fact that this movie is 4 hours of great pacing and Zack Snyder storytelling. I read a joke of if you just cut down the amount of slow motion scenes, then this movie would be 3 hours instead of 4 hours. Sure, but then you would not get Zack Snyder's beautiful visual storytelling. And the fact that it's 4 hours, it is still incredibly well paced, and it doesn't even feel like 4 hours. You can watch this in a breeze, in one sitting. If you don't believe me, Matt and I did it on our live watch along. We didn't get up once. The movie is phenomenal and it's incredibly well paced. It does not even feel like 4 hours.
This is a very personal pro for me, but sound design. Just the tweaks that he did to Steppenwolf's voice, just the little tweaks that happened with Cyborg's movements. Everything has a purpose. Ray Porter killed it as Darkseid. Peter Guinness killed it as Desaad. Those voices fit perfectly. Sound design and how these characters are presented, even with something as simple as their voice, how they move. Steppenwolf's voice and the enhancements that they put in that just lays down a much more menacing threat when he says something. Unlike the theatrical, where it was just Kieran Hines just talking. But they just added a little bit, just a little bit of a tweak. And it made him so much more impactful, so much more believable as a spiky fucker that gives zero fucks.
I have come to enlighten you to the great darkness. I will bathe in your fear.
Exactly. Another pro in this is the villains, is Steppenwolf, is Darkseid. You don't nerf your villain because then that just makes your superhero look like a bully when he returns. In this case, you have Steppenwolf, who is whooping ass, does not care. He's going to get the 3 mother boxes. He is going to create the unity. So then when you go toe to toe with Steppenwolf, you have to bring your A game. You have to battle. You see Wonder Woman, you see all these characters, Superman whooping some ass. It means something.
And the fact that you didn't bury your villain. Just in the introduction alone with Steppenwolf to the Amazons, you set up Steppenwolf perfectly, but then you show the Amazons at their toughest. While they might still get their asses whooped in the end of the day, they ain't laying down for no one.
Daughters of Themyscira, show him your fear! We have no fear!
That just puts your characters on a different level. You can take them serious. And that's what matters so much when it comes to these comic book movies, is taking these characters serious.
This ties into the 4-hour pro, the fact that every hero has their moment, every hero shines in this movie. I can name 100 moments in which they are looking badass, in which they have an emotional connection, in which they have great heart-filled moments with other characters in this film. Every character was fleshed out so incredibly well that it makes the 4 hours completely worth it.
And also the parademons. They're not simply just stormtroopers. They can actually hit shit. And this dude right here was the MVP. That guy was gonna get his own parking spot if he would have survived.
Employee of the month right there.
Last but certainly not least, Cyborg's story arc. Snyder from very early on was saying Cyborg was the heart of his movie. And now seeing it in action, it truly explains so much. It also just baffles you when it comes to the theatrical cut. Why did they feel it was necessary to rip these elements out? Was the 2-hour mandate really that important to remove some essential pieces to this story out? Was it really that important to reduce a character's role to pretty much Google Maps? Cyborg's role in Zack Snyder's Justice League isn't just a minor ensemble piece. He actually truly is the heart of the story. The struggles he deals with, the complexity of what he now is important to the story. When you think about the dads of the DCEU, you think of Jor-El, you think of Pa Kent, you even see in this movie Henry Allen as well. But the complexity between Victor and Silas.
People were taken by some kind of monsters.
You know a lot about monsters, don't you? Especially how to make them.
All right, look. You don't have to give me a second chance, but give yourself one. If you can't stand looking at me, try listening. Your physical strength is just the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the tip.
In the world of ones and zeros, you are the absolute master. No firewall can stop you. No encryption can defy you. We're all at your mercy, Vic.
Silas being truly conflicted about his choices with his son. Did he fail his son by turning him into this thing? Did he help his son? The uncertainty of these questions. Did you do the right thing? This is that moral gray area that we do get And of course, Cyborg accepting his role, realizing that he is not broken.
We've been waiting for you, Victor. My broken boy.
You don't have to be alone anymore. We'll be together again.
I'm not broken. And I'm not alone.
So now we're going to do a little bit of a shift. Now this is going to be kind of cons, kind of more of what we were expecting to happen, but it didn't happen. So it's kind of hard to say the movie has an issue with this because we were expecting it and it didn't happen. Not getting some of these things answered or some of these things not happening the way you expected was kind of weird for us because we had been following this for so long. So you would think that we had a pretty good understanding how some of this thing was going to turn out. And we did. But there were some moments, for instance, the history lesson, where we thought it was going to be a lot longer, and we thought there was going to be more reveals to that history lesson as a significant point for Uxas's backstory.
Exactly. Some of these, like the history lesson, are just simple, the fans kind of overbooking the territory a little bit, fantasy booking. There was so much rumor that had built up over the years before this movie got released that we were thinking the history lesson was going to be a half an hour long. So when it wasn't, it was somewhat of a letdown of, okay, I thought there was supposed to be a little bit more to that, but there wasn't. So not necessarily a con, but just us kind of elevating the expectations in our mind. So when it doesn't live up to those, it's almost impossible to. It kind of feels like a letdown.
And even there were some points where Connie Nielsen came out and said there was even going to be some backstory or maybe even origins of the Amazons. And you think the history lesson was going to be that moment, and it didn't happen. And it actually didn't happen at all in this movie. That's just one instance. The Heroes Park fight was another one. While we did understand that the resurrection scene was going to happen almost the same way, obviously there were some twists and turns there as well. I was really expecting the military to have more involvement in this. And then there was even an idea that there was going to be even a bigger battle going back on in Star Labs. Well, that didn't happen either. The Heroes Park fight still kind of plays out very similar to the theatrical. There is a little bit of changes here and there, but it's still during the day, which is kind of odd because even in the little teaser that Snyder put out, it was at night. But these little tweaks here and there, it still kind of feels like we're missing some of that action, and who knows the reason why.
Exactly. We do know that a large portion of the Heroes Park fight is what we saw in the theatrical version, aside from some of the stupid jokes like, do you bleed? Something's definitely bleeding. But we were expecting there to be a lot more involved with that, even with some of the resurrection to Superman, like the Codex maybe being mentioned or involved in that. And then just the Heroes Park fight being longer, the military having more of a presence, similar to the Man of Steel Smallville fight. And the fact that that didn't happen wasn't necessarily a letdown. It was just somewhat of a surprise of, oh, that was kind of it. We saw most of this.
And a couple other questions that weren't answered was obviously the dirt coming off the coffin. That was something I was really hoping to get an answer for. We did our top 5 questions we hoped to get answered in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and we kind of did that on the presumption that those things were going to be answered and that we could return back to that video saying, here's the answers for that. Well, it actually turns out a lot of those things in that video weren't answered. Before anybody says that the casket rising off the dirt had to do something with Superman and him coming back to life a little bit, or his life force still being there, just like when he flies, no, he's dead. He's got a hole in his chest, and Snyder even replied to somebody when they asked, is the dirt just moving because of Superman? He said, it was more, much, much more.
Something to go back to the pros a little bit when I talked about the heroes having their moment, and this is so much more character based. One of the things that we were expecting to see a little bit more because of the initial trailers back in 2017 was the impact that this was having on the world. The impact of Superman's death, and then also this impact of Superman's resurrection. How did that impact the world? What was it that the world was seeing? We thought we saw a little bit of that in the theatrical version, which completely turned out to be all of Joss Whedon's intro, but it was the world kind of going into chaos a little bit. That's somewhat what I was expecting to see in this version, but obviously done way better, and you didn't really get to see that. This was definitely more focused on each of the characters and the heroes.
Yeah, so some of those morally gray issues that you have with the world and how they perceive these heroes wasn't there. Now that could be because we have evolved past this point, that things like the Superman question aren't needed anymore. We need a Superman, we need a Wonder Woman, we need these characters. So now it's about building the League. And it comes all back again to the fact that this was filmed in 2016 with the idea that there was going to be sequels in standalone movies that were gonna benefit from this movie. These moments were all set to build these characters up for those particular times. And as Snyder has talked about before, the dominoes are falling quickly in this world. So I think at this point we're just past those morally gray areas when it comes to superheroes in the DC universe.
One of my biggest annoyances of this film when I watched it the first few times was the fact that Uxas, eventually Darkseid, ends up losing Earth. He loses the place where all of the mother boxes were left. He loses the place in which he unearthed the anti-life equation. And I couldn't quite understand that. And we've debated online before. We talked about it during our live stream. We talked about it during our watch along. And I couldn't understand and couldn't really buy any reasoning for how he didn't remember that Earth was the only place that he lost, that he lost the mother boxes there, and that he unearthed the anti-life equation. But then someone on the internet did give a pretty good explanation. He talks about that when you go back to the original history lesson, it does look like it could be on Themyscira. Now, we do know that eventually Zeus does hide Themyscira from the world, so maybe that's why when he blocks the anti-life equation and he hides Themyscira, then that's why it can no longer be found by Darkseid or any of his minions. And the only reason why it is found is because then the mother box has finally awoken. I can kind of buy that reasoning.
Zack Snyder did give a reason why Uxas forgot Earth is the only place he's ever lost and where his biggest prize is. Snyder did say he almost died when he returned to Apokolips. He was in a fight for power, and much time passed before he was in a position of power again. By then, all who had been with him had been slayed. So he almost died, went back to Apokolips. There's a huge fight on Apokolips for power. That becomes his number one item on his agenda list, is to control Apokolips. A lot of time passed. Anybody that was on his side in that history lesson has died. No one was able to find the planet again. And yes, the solar system, the cosmos itself, especially in the DC universe, is massive. And I could understand in some sense you losing track of it, but damn it, next time, Uxas, remember to update your TomTom. All right, for shits and the giggles, we've decided we'll end this on ranking the 3 Zack Snyder DCEU movie.
So my number 3 is going to be Batman v Superman, of course, the Ultimate Edition.
So my number 3 is Zack Snyder's Justice League.
That makes my number 2, obviously, maybe not so obvious, Zack Snyder's Justice League. This film is still phenomenal, and I do love Batman v Superman, but I'm really enjoying and I'm really loving Zack Snyder's Justice League.
All right, my number 2, which may be obvious as well because you got a 50-50 shot, Batman vs. Superman Ultimate Edition. The Ultimate Edition, it has the Trinity, it has Doomsday, it has Batman versus Superman. It's always going to be up there. And you get some of those philosophical questions with it as well. Little extra brain teasers with you. And that's why it sits at my number 2.
So as Trailer Trash, we're not that good at math, but there does leave only one option for both of us. The consensus still remains that Man of Steel is the number 1 movie for Zack Snyder. Now these could kind of be 1A, 1B, and 1C. They are all 3 phenomenal movies that can kind of be swapped out, but Man of Steel laid the foundation for this universe so incredibly well. It is such a different take on a superhero movie. It is such a sci-fi fantasy and a beautiful movie with highs and lows and amazing villains and everything in between. That's why it's my number 1.
It's my number 1 because a kid calls another kid Dick Splash.
Ha dangly part.
All right, that'll wrap up our spoiler review for Zack Snyder's Justice League. For those that actually made it through this whole thing and watched this thing after a week and a half of it being out, congratulations. You have to make better choices in your life.
Thank you to everyone, as Matt mentioned, that made it to the end of this video. And if you did, here are our standard plugs. We do have a Patreon, a YouTube membership, so be sure to check us out on there. Please leave a like on this video. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We do also have some activity on social media. We have a Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I think we still have a Vero, maybe, possibly. Check us out on there.
In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.